or 9 a.m. Pacific in audio and video on Facebook Live, Periscope, Twitch, LinkedIn Live, and YouTube. A conversation about life, entrepreneurship, personal development, family tech, and marketing. Of course, my name is Ivan Temelkov, and I'm your host. And here's where you'll gather 100% real, raw, and unfiltered, life-changing advice to help you level up in every aspect of your life and business and help you reach your goals and dreams. Ladies and gentlemen, today I am joined with Andrew Beinbrink. Did I pronounce that correctly?
It's Beinbrink, but it gets butchered, more than any other name in the world. So it's all good.
Andrew Beinbrink. So Andrew, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks, Ivan. Glad to be part of it. I know we were catching up earlier, so I know we're going to dive right into a lot of things that I think are really relevant for people creating the life of their dreams.
Absolutely. And before we do that, I just want to give the listeners and watchers of this episode just a quick paragraph about who you are so they know where you're coming from. So CEO and one of the co-founders of SportsForce, you were a 3-sport athlete in high school and a former college, Arizona State, and professional baseball player at the Tampa Bay Rays and Texas Rangers. Bringing a wealth of hands-on college recruiting and sports experience, continuously inspired to teach student athletes, coaches, and parents how to reach their potential, play sports with integrity, and achieve their goals on and off the field. You have personally assisted over 300 student athletes and families through the college recruiting process. Let's see, founder of Yoga for Homeless. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. And also a believer in human transformation and force for good. Amazing background, man. Like but before we dive into all of this, let's start with, childhood. Let's talk a little bit about what was your childhood like and, what led you up to, sports and what you're doing with, the business side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. My dad was in the military, so that kind of took us to a lot of different places around the world. I was born in Naples, Italy, and lived there, and then moved to New York for a short stay that we had there, and then Seoul, Korea, until I was about 4 years old. And then we landed in Southern California, and most of my upbringing was in Southern California. But I would say the military background of being able to travel and be able to, adjust and navigate different areas of the world helped just me getting more and more comfortable with people. And I would say one of the through lines that I think is really important for me in my life is the connection with other people and being able to be of service to other people. And I think some of the best entrepreneurs in the world have that as one of their major through lines, is that they really have a love for people and want to either solve problems or bring products or services, to people in a unique way. And, right. I've had a lot of, and I've mentored a lot of entrepreneurs, and some entrepreneurs are like, I just have to have this amazing idea. And usually it comes down to less about having an amazing idea, but really solving a human problem. And going after that is really the impetus and driving force for usually getting a business started, because you really got to care about what you're doing if you're going to start something from scratch.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to touch upon that real quick, because I think modern entrepreneurship is so different because, you mentioned it's not so much about having an awesome idea. And I believe that it's important to have ideas, but you have to be able to solve a problem. The bigger the problem, the bigger the opportunity. And I think too many entrepreneurs get hung up on, I have an amazing idea, but they don't actually do anything with that idea. They don't actually start. They don't start connecting. They don't start to find a solution, to that problem. But the biggest thing also that you mentioned towards the end is to make that human connection. And honestly, I agree with you 100% on that, 100%. Every successful entrepreneur, and again, it just depends on, what success looks like to you, but let's say it's money or building a business or achieving certain things that you've had as dreams since childhood, that being the definition of success. Each one of those people are human connectors. They're relationship builders. And when you said that, also, I can resonate with that so much, being an Eastern European and also, going through so much adversity in my early childhood, also to come to a realization that I've always been a people person. I've always been a connector, as opposed to, taking this idea and saying, you know what, this is the best idea, and I'm going to bring it to fruition. No, like, connect with people, help solve a problem. The bigger the problem, the bigger the opportunity, and then you cleanse and repeat from there, literally.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And, I think for any entrepreneurs or a potential entrepreneur in the future, look at what your natural passions are, or your natural inclinations, because whatever you do, if you pursue starting something new, you're really going to have to make sure that there's enough energy behind it, to, work through those dark nights, and be able to maintain the kind of the stick-wittedness that's going to be necessary to get something to market. And so either just deeply connecting, to what it is that you're passionate about, and maybe your passion is people. And, that's part of your deal. And you're just like a social, connector, and you want to be able to just be of service, to a specific group of people sometimes. And then talking with them, you can learn and uncover problems that, that group of people or that market is experiencing. And then maybe your business idea, instead of comes through you and maybe your innovation and inventiveness, but comes through just conversations of listening.
Yeah. And I think, so me and you met on Clubhouse, the new app that everybody's talking about. And before we hit record, we talked exactly about that, as the ability to create those human connections, and how they've taken, such a simple, fundamental principle, and amplified it to the point to where I think someone said that there are over 1 million users in like 6 months of existence. And it's just fascinating to see from a technology standpoint how an app is connecting so many amazing people around the world and giving them a platform for them to interact from an audio perspective. Because as we know, that there's two ways. There's two types of people. There's auditory people and there's visual type of people. Now, this is where, video and content driving the majority of traffic on the internet, because it's about storytelling. This is why we're recording this podcast in video, is because it creates a realistic, interpretation in the eyes of the viewer. But then audio is the next best thing, right? Because you get to hear the voice. And I was literally blown away, and I've been only on, Clubhouse for a couple of weeks now, that like meeting you and other great people also, like I don't think I would have had that opportunity to do that. But even then, so is leveraging those connections, like me reaching out to you and saying, hey, Andrew, we should do a podcast. I think you got a great background. I see what you're doing, but it's just that. So going back to, when you were moving around your childhood days, like, how did sports kind of come about? And then obviously, being college bound and then going pro. I'd love to hear the story about going pro.
Yeah. I mean, sports, I guess, growing up in Southern California, sports is just kind of the staple, in that community. So growing up playing, soccer, baseball, basketball. And then when I got into high school, I started playing football as well. And I always looked at sports as a really, and it was always team sports. So I was, building friendships, and sports, as an activity is a really good way to build just relationships and friendships. And then, I started, just excelling at them. So I just kind of put more and more time into the different sports that I was playing. And then, when I got to high school, well, let's say this, actually, I'll rewind the clock. And I knew, like, as a 5 and 6 year old, that I wanted to be a professional baseball player. So
wow. Really
young. Yeah. I grew up in a neighborhood where there was just a bunch of, kids that were playing pickup stickball games, on the streets and whatnot. And, we were just watching baseball on TV and collecting baseball cards. So it was really like just part of, I don't know, just one of those early childhood dreams.
Yeah.
And fast forward, sports through high school. And then, I started getting scouted by different professional scouts and different college scouts, and really had an opportunity, to get recruited and sign, and a scholarship at Arizona State. And, that was part of the impetus to starting SportsForce, was realizing how big of a decision it is for young men and women as student athletes to figure out where they're going to go to college, because it's just much more of a dynamic and complex decision than just saying, oh, I want to be a student and go to this school. And so, and I think sports is like the ultimate, it's one of the ultimate classrooms that parents cannot try to replicate in their own home. Like the lessons that you learn through sports really are something that can be transferred to other parts of your life, that a parent can say, oh, let me teach my kid how to be more confident. Let me teach my kid how to be more this. But nothing like the arts and sports and just where you have to be, where competition is, whatever that is. It could be chess, it could be arts, it could be robotics. Just putting young men and young women in places where they have to compete and be measured and be able to build something or work together is really, really powerful to build the values that I think can translate to other parts of life.
Yeah. That's a really good point. I actually want to expand upon that. Like you said, sports is really competitive. And, for me, as I think in my 20s, I was huge into basketball, like the days of Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen and Shaquille O'Neal. I feel like they were probably a decade ago now when they were so active, right? But then at some point, kind of like faded, I think. I mean, still into sports, but not like heavily into it. Still into baseball, not so much into football, but, and basketball too, whenever I can, but nothing nowhere near what it was in my 20s. But the competitive nature of that you pointed out, I think is important. I think especially in early childhood, as you were growing up, it's just that I think you probably had some level of energy behind that too. That was kind of driving your understanding the competitive nature of it and how it was measured, because sports is measured based on performance. And in essence, like how you score, whether it's a home run or whether it's a basket, a 3-pointer, or a free throw or whatever in any sport, right? And I think that really drives a lot of people, right? I think that's why they say sports is a universal language, right? It's because I think there's such a quantitative aspect to that a lot of people actually don't understand. I mean, sure, it's great to see these superstar athletes that are playing, but underneath that is the scoring, the competitive nature, and who's going pro from college, or who's maybe retiring to Hall of Fame or something. So cool. So as you were getting into college and then you went pro, obviously. At what point did that kind of like starting your own business come about?
Yeah, well, I'll rewind the clock a little bit. So I started making money as a 7th grader in middle school, and the concept was really simple. Like, there wasn't vending machines at our middle school. Being able to provide candy. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to sell Skittles and make some money just as a 7th grader, buying a box of Skittles pretty much once or twice a week, and just being able to make money. And I guess sugar's like a drug for kids, right? It's super addictive. So I had a really good product. And so I was selling out those Skittles boxes really quick. But I think I was just interested in understanding how to bring something to the market and be able to, sell and interact with people. And then fast forward, when I was in high school, I started designing my own clothes. And so that was kind of another creative outlet. I guess I was always just interested in starting something from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
So I was using a sewing machine and doing also silkscreen t-shirt designs. And this was really a hobby. I didn't try to take it much bigger than that. And then sports, started really getting, I would say, filling up my schedule. And then once I went off to college at Arizona State, I was drafted by the Red Sox out of high school, had a chance to sign professionally, but decided to go to college instead. And then I went the college route and, signed professionally after college, and just really realized that, hey, you know what, even after I get done playing, sports is always going to be a part of my life.
Yeah. And
so the impetus for starting SportsForce was realizing that most parents have never raised a student athlete before, haven't gone through either the college or the professional transition process. Student athletes are often, coached by coaches that haven't gone through, a high level college or professional process, and there just needed to be more mentorship and guidance in place. So SportsForce is really, nailing kind of the challenge where you're an unrecognized, high school student athlete who needs to get, exposure to a variety of different college potentially that could be all over the country, to then get recruited, and using technology. So I really wanted to bridge sports and technology to create this platform to connect people. So that was,
So there's, as you were talking, there were a few things there I wanted to touch upon because they were key. First of all, you were talking about candy. As a father of a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, I'm like, my kids get their hands, on candy. It's like, it's all over. And then it's like, oh, we want candy for dinner. So like, yes, you had an amazing product. You hit the nail, on the head with that one. And then obviously from there, it was kind of like, a snowball. It was a chain effect. But you're absolutely right, and when you were talking about that most parents have not raised a child that aspires to be a professional athlete is 100% true, because most parents were not professional athletes. Let's face it this way, and this is what we see in entrepreneurship nowadays. In fact, I was trying not to just example. I was on Clubhouse recently. I saw someone that started a room teaching something that they have never done, and that was a prime example, like, of entrepreneurship. And when you were speaking of how most parents have never raised a professional athlete, their child, and they aspire to do that, is they were missing the education. And that's where you were filling in that gap, basically, to provide the mentorship and that guidance. So they would be an asset to their child, because it's great to be a father and a mother, right? But it's different to know how to guide your child for something that they love and they're passionate about, which you were. I could tell you've been passionate, and you've loved playing sports since a very young age. So when you were talking about energy earlier, I think that was that energy. For you, is like there was a love and passion, that freedom, perhaps, that sports was given that to you. The other thing, like you mentioned, it was really interesting. You said that you had an opportunity to sign with the Red Sox out of high school, but you passed on that opportunity. So I'm sure there was a lot of debate on that, right? I'm sure that was a difficult decision, because let's face it, coming out of high school, going pro, that's a dream come true for most kids. But you said, no, I want to go to college.
Yeah.
So, and actually, I want to segue that from there, because another thought that I had on my mind is, by the way, congrats that you made that decision, because I think that at that crossroads, when talented, aspiring athletes, have that opportunity, they take it, because they're so blindsided by the flashiness. And I'm going pro, I'm going to make money, I'm going to wear a professional jersey, I'm going to be on a field with tens of thousands of fans on there. Like, they get caught up in the glamour, I think, but you didn't. And I know at 18 years old, that had to be a difficult decision, right?
100%. Yeah, you start talking about the money, and you start thinking about, where you could spend the money, what you could do with it. And for me, it came down to, there was a couple things that were going on. So my dad was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer when I was a senior in high school. So he was going through chemotherapy, as, that whole getting drafted professionally was happening. And that kind of put life into an interesting perspective from a family perspective. And him and I really butted heads kind of coming up through like high school, as most teenagers do with their dads, especially like motivated, ambitious young men don't want to, listen to what their dad's telling them to do all the time.
Right.
And he was a captain in the military, and I was just like, you know what, I'm just going to do things my way, and so that really helped, I guess, reestablish a good father-son relationship. Was actually him being diagnosed, and he was given, it was stage 4 pancreatic cancer. So they were like, you know what, he's got 6 months to live, and time is fleeting. And I tell parents this, all the time, and I say that, the days that your son is going to have a jersey on their back playing a sport that they love, it's fleeting. This time is fleeting. Like, how are you supporting them? And how are you enjoying the journey? Because, they're not going to play forever. So that's a big lesson that I try to impart on different parents.
One thing, not to interject, that you said, and I actually remember because my son has played not wiffle ball, but I think it was t-ball. That's what it was, t-ball. So he played t-ball, he played soccer, and we're trying to get him into sports. I think he really likes sports. We just haven't really found like which one yet, because he's 4 and my daughter's 2. But you said the lifespan of an athlete is short. You said fleeting. So, I'm a St. Louis Cardinals fan because I live in St. Louis, obviously. And Yadier Molina, who's one of the best catchers in the league, right? Yep. Like looking at like him winding down his career, right? But when you look at it, it's a really short career, in terms of years. And when you come to realize that's a really good point that you made, is just that I think parents for aspiring athletes need to be 200% supportive of their children and do it in a way where, they support them unconditionally. Because that lifespan is actually very short from the time that, let's hypothetically say, college sports, and then maybe they go pro. And that's a span of 20 years, maybe? Yes. That's not really a long time, for an athlete. When you have to keep in mind that, it's really probably maybe 10 to 15 years that you would be pro if you end up going pro, right? Exactly. It's such a short, time span. So you made a really good point, and I think a lot of parents don't realize that because they don't really know what they're getting into. And you actually gave me really good insight saying that, because I'm thinking, okay, one day my son's going to play sports, right? Do I need to hire like a professional coach or something to help guide him? Because I can be there and support him, but like you said, this is why I think SportsForce exists, is to mentor parents, right, to help guide them to know how to support and encourage their kids so they can fulfill their dreams, because it was your dream to go pro, right? It's maybe all your life, but at least at some point in your life. And I know that's probably what goes on through a child's head. It's like they want to go pro. They see these idols on TV hitting home runs and, throwing long yards in the NFL, or even now with soccer being so popular also as well, So, I want to segue the question, though, because I was just thinking about this, would love to get your thoughts on the current state of sports with COVID and everything. Like, what have you seen? What are some predictions that you think into 2021? Would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I'll talk about youth sports, and then I'll talk about like college and professional sports, all right? So I can kind of break them up into 2 different things. And I would say, youth sports has been heavily impacted by COVID-19, depending on what state or what country you live in. So for most of it, for many different states, it's just been shut down. Like they're not playing outside, or they're not playing indoor competitions. But what that does is it gives a time for players and parents to actually better prioritize training. And I think what's going on right now is you're really running into an epidemic where single sport specialization at a young age has become so popular. Like, imagine your 4-year-old, now he's 10 years old, and you're saying, you know what, I only want you to play soccer or baseball and just do that That used to not happen. And the challenge with that is it's creating overuse injuries. So, a 12-year-old's arms blowing out because they're throwing every weekend in games, 50 weekends, 50 weekends a year, or whatever, 30 weekends a year.
Right.
And the body's just not ready for that. So if you're a parent and you're raising children that are playing sports, my recommendation is continue to expose them to a variety of different sports, see what resonates and what kind of lights them up. And don't be so concerned if your child is showing such advanced skill at a young age that you have to just put all your eggs in that basket. I don't think that's healthy. I think you can look at potentially single sport specialization later, usually at the high school level, if that's required for that sport and for that player to really excel. And let's say the prospect of going to college or playing professionally are really there. But prior to high school, I would, give them a lot of variety, because it also helps the human body of a young athlete develop in different ways, because basketball is going to teach you different things that baseball could never teach you. And, soccer is going to teach you different things. And it'll also give your body more what they refer to as a balanced, right? Because a sport like baseball, where you're swinging something and you're only doing it from one side over and over and over again, you can have real muscle imbalances and just challenges with your overall health.
Yeah, it's kind of like what you said is, I think, really important. I just want to touch upon that. You said variety of different sports, and it's kind of like when you go to the gym and they say, full body workout is great. So like, not just to confine your child to just baseball or soccer or, I don't know, even golf maybe, or football, right? But like, have them try it all, because it kind of gives them that, full body experience and allows their body to develop, because you never know when your child might discover, a hidden potential. They might be really good at baseball because they can swing a bat. I know my son can swing a bat like crazy. I'm like, okay, he's going to be probably a baseball player, because he just likes swinging, he likes swinging. Yeah. Now you got to get it to control swinging. That's another story. Swing at the ball. Don't swing at me, because he swings with force. So it requires some coaching right there. But that's a really good point, because I think, some parents, especially like if parents were into sports, like at some point in their life, usually like in high school maybe, or maybe they played in college, but they kind of had this dream on the back of their mind that maybe one day they'll go pro. So now being, father or a mother, like, what, maybe my child can be a pro baseball player. Like, it's like they're reliving their own dream almost, and which is a whole nother conversation, I think. But it's interesting you said, the shutdown of sports, but still, encouraging parents, to really expose their kids, to try out different sports, kick the ball around, throw the football, maybe swing the bat here and there, and like alternate that, right? It's kind of what you were going after.
Absolutely. And the other point is that the importance of training and understanding the fundamentals. So if you think about martial arts and karate, and you have different, colored belts for you to work your way all the way up to a black belt. Mm-hmm. And so sports are pretty technical in a way where you have to learn the basic movements. And another analogy might be like learning the guitar or playing the piano. You have to learn the basic notes first of the music before you move on to more accelerated moves. And sports are very similar. So, and the challenge with just playing a bunch of games is it doesn't give you like the training ground in a safe and comfortable environment sometimes to build the foundation that's needed for, let's say, swinging a bat or throwing a baseball. And the earlier you can get the right technique, this is the critical kind of takeaway. The earlier you can get the right technique and the right habits, then you start to stack strength and growth on top of that. And you're going to have a longer, healthier, more successful experience as an athlete in that particular sport.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. I want to shift the conversation a little bit towards the human transformation, because I know you're huge on human transformation and force of good. And I would love to hear your take on that. Like, how do you interpret that human transformation? How do you apply that in your life, on with the business, anything and everything? Take it away on that.
Yeah, I think it's in our DNA to care for, our fellow brothers and sisters. Like, I think that's just part of our tribal DNA. We've been on this planet for hundreds of thousands of years, and we've been trained, through tribes on how to care for each other. So I think on a primal and tribal level, like it's in our DNA to care for each other. And I just really try to, infuse that in everything that I put my time and energy into, of saying, okay, how is this going to be a vehicle for transformation in someone's life? So obviously sports, is a big vehicle for people's transformation, physically, emotionally, mentally, even academically. And then, entrepreneurship is also a really transformational engine. Like, starting a business and getting a product to market, and then going, and then learning how to do sales and marketing and scaling that business. Like, that is in and of itself is a total transformational journey. So I love entrepreneurs. To me, business is like the ultimate sport, and entrepreneurs are the ultimate athletes. And so if we can help more entrepreneurs be empowered, I think we're living in a current capitalistic system that is challenging, where in a way where, the concept of saying, oh, you're going to work this, 9-to-5 job and you're going to punch this clock. People are looking for just a different path, right? They want to have a different path, to express themselves creatively. So that's why I love, the entrepreneurial route. And I'd say the other things that interest me relative to transformation and human transformation, I didn't share this with you, but I've been kind of involved in, blockchain for quite a while as well. And I just get attracted to innovative technology that I think is going to scale and be able to, transform systems that are broken, old, or, just, let's say, antiquated systems. And so that's where, I just have a strong interest. And if, I think if you're listening to this and you're an entrepreneur, you're on a journey that's going to be part of your own transformation, but also, by who you serve, depending on your product, you might be able to build a transformational experience into what you're offering as well. And I think at this time, more than ever before in the history of our planet and our civilization, we need more transformational leaders to emerge, because we have a lot of healing to be done, and a lot of what I would say is disruptive restructuring that's possible of doing, that is needed to be done. So you have, climate needs to be healed, and we need to look at how we use energy differently. We need to look at how we manage our financial systems differently, so we can have opportunity for abundance and wealth to be more pervasive across the world. And then I think technology is always pushing innovation, to a point where we're saying, how can we have jobs that are being done by humans? How can we have them replaced and have automation or robotics or other systems in place, and then let humans work on more creative, higher level, energetic and transformational opportunities? Because at the core of us, we're here to be of service. And the more we can create an economy and kind of a system around where people can generate and deliver value, I think there's enough to go around. we're just having to go through a massive metamorphosis and restructuring process that I think it's exciting to be alive right now because of there's so much disruption and innovation and opportunity. So yeah, I guess that's the long-winded version of what really, gets me fired up about thinking about human transformation and being a force for good.
Wow, I love that, every bit of that. And one thing that really stood out to me that I wanted to speak to is the disruptive restructuring that you mentioned, because I want to start with the entrepreneurial journey. I think entrepreneurship is very commonly scrutinized because it's frowned upon. And I think it's largely because it's so misunderstood by outsiders. And this is why, I'm a huge proponent for other entrepreneurs such as yourself, because we are problem solvers. We are the innovators of tomorrow. Looking at the Elon Musk of the world, which I just heard that was it a couple weeks ago, he's officially the wealthiest person in the world by $1 billion. Second to him is Bezos, but there's only $1 billion difference, and that's because Tesla stock jumped in 2020. But that's another reason, like you said, it's an amazing time to be alive, because for me 2020 was the best year in almost 6 years in business. And it was because if there's one thing that I learned, and I think 2020 has taught me, and other entrepreneurs hopefully watching and listening understand this, is that where there's a problem, there's a solution awaiting. And so there were a lot of problems in 2020. We had the epidemic, we've got the stimulus, we had the elections. I mean, it was like problem after problem after problem after problem. But at the same time, there were solutions being applied. And entrepreneurs, small businesses, sure, the government played a part, but also for entrepreneurs specifically, presented tremendous opportunities to create solutions to these problems, because that's where growth happens. If you don't have problems, if you don't have discomfort, you are not growing. You are stagnant. And I think, in today's society, that we live in, I think as humans, and I've done an extensive episode on this, is that we're wired with fear. We're wired with a bit of pessimism, simply because we want to remain comfortable in our domain, because comfortable is good. So the human transformation element in this, and why disruptive restructuring, I even brought that up, is because I think there's a necessity for it, because it's part of evolution. It's part of evolution that, like you mentioned, even in our tribal days, right? We were taught to care for each other because we needed to coexist. So everything that entrepreneurs do, everything that you've done, in actuality contributes to humans, to society, and impact. So parents, the mentorship, the education, the guidance that you give, but it's more than that. It's with a purpose, because that value that you share helps other parents transform their children into aspiring athletes. Now that is a lifelong endeavor. That's a life-changing experience. And I think there's a misinterpretation there. Hence why I think you guys spend so much time on mentorship and education, because it needs to be communicated. And I'm a huge fan of that. Because there's never enough education, believe it or not. In fact, if there's one thing that I personally have learned in entrepreneurship, is if you lead with education, if you lead with guidance and thought leadership, you create authority. By creating authority, you become the go-to expert. That's how leaders basically become leaders. And in essence, they lead with value. They lead with guidance that is of benefit, that solves a problem. So the problem that you guys solve is for parents, is how can I help my child become the best athlete? I don't have the resources. I don't have the education. How do I help them get a scholarship? If I don't have the resources, like what institution should I turn to? Guide us. So I just don't think that, people that aren't wired to be entrepreneurs, because entrepreneurs are risk takers. That's what we are. And it's actually, believe it or not, in our human nature. think
Yes.
about it, is back to the tribal days that you were talking about, is that what do we do in tribes? We hunted. We still hunt nowadays, but I think with the minutia of everything that's happening in politics and news and media, it's like that has been buried down below. It's a very, very basic human thing. Is this that it's in our human nature to thrive, to hunt, to seek opportunities. But it's almost like in modern day and age, too many people are settling for less. They're unwilling to explore. They're unwilling to risk. They're unwilling to be disruptive. And honestly, me personally, I love disruption. I feel like it's a necessity, because without disruption, there wouldn't be any growth. There wouldn't be any evolution. It's like, I remember watching a movie a long time ago. It's like everything is in black and white. Could you imagine if the world was in black and white? Could you imagine that, like, everyone, men and women, got up at the same time every day, got in the same car every day, went to the same job every day, made the same amount of money every day? Like, where's the diversity in that? Go ahead.
Yeah. No, you're right. And where's the juice? Where's like the life force that comes through you? So, I think for people that are listening, and I know you have a variety of different kind of personalities that listen, to your show. At the end of the day, like, your life and my life is fleeting. So our time on this planet is fleeting, and we have to be. Death is a great reminder to live. And so I was on a Clubhouse, probably a couple weeks back, and the question was, we were talking about advances in technology, and the question was, would you want to know, when you were going to die? And if you had a choice, you could know the exact date, based on some algorithm that would, estimate when you were going to die. And I said, yeah, I would love to know, for a couple reasons. One, it's nice to understand, like, you have a ticking clock, like the scoreboard in sports. Right. What you need to get done before the game's over. So I think as human beings, we work better under some constraints. And when we have a constraint in place, and if you have to remind yourself, hey, you know what, this life is fleeting. I need to make the most of it. I need to be able to pursue things that I really care about and I'm passionate about. And then I need to surround myself and build a tribe of other people that are also going after what they're what they're passionate about. I think it's super critical to engineer your environment, so that you're capable of growth. Because as human beings, like to your point earlier, we're wired for growth. We're wired for change. We're wired for progress. However, if the environment is not conducive for growth and progress and for transformation, it's not just going to happen typically by someone's willpower. The environment of your community, of where you're putting your time and your energy, of what information you're consuming, that all feeds, I think, the growth environment and creating that growth mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. 100%. The question you brought up is the Clubhouse question. It's a very interesting one, because I think it's so there's people who would say, like in the game, you've got the shot clock, you got 15 minutes left or however much time. And let's say that's all the time you have left. So some people will say, yes, I want to know how much time I've got left on this earth before I die, right? Because they want to create an expectation. And I agree with you. I think that when we create, or more of a goal, really, I should say, more of a goal that we strive towards, is that it creates a sense of pressure, but it's a good pressure, because it forces you to do even more. It raises the bar and the standard and the expectations that you put on yourself as a human being. Then there's probably people that would say, okay, well, I don't want to know, because it's the spontaneity behind that. So I think it comes down to perception, right? Because perception is reality, right? And that's another beauty thing as human beings, that we have different realities. So this was another episode that I did actually, is just that, and just to keep it short, there's three different realities. There's your reality, there's my reality, and there's the reality of the world. And that's just the way it is, literally. And that's the beauty about how we differentiate as human beings, how we contribute to society and the world, how we interpret things specifically, because logic is huge. And in fact, speaking of technology, when you mentioned that early, I think, technology is largely about logic, right? Because if you look at technology, let's say programming is about logic. It's 100% logic. It's a language like maybe PHP, or HTML, right? Some of the most basic ones, these are about logic, basically. But I think a lot of people don't really understand that. So if you have really good logic and you're a very logical person, programming might appeal to you. I know it appealed to me because I love logic. I'm a sucker for logic. Yep. But there's people out there that just don't have the logic. So now you have companionship. You have someone who is a huge fan of logic and someone who doesn't really jive with it, but they complement each other, basically. Sure. And that's the beauty about how I think technology and innovation and disruption, and how different human beings, how we contribute individually to society to grow and thrive. And I would agree with you. I think even though with all the difficulties in 2020, I think it is a great time to be alive. I mean, we've got electric cars, we've got AI, we've got robotics, and maybe this is just me being a tech nerd since, I've been a kid pretty much, but how you leverage all of these things, literally, whether it's to build a business or something in your personal life, is 100% up to you. Right? You figure it out how it's the application aspect of it. And that's essential to entrepreneurship, right? Is, like you said early on, it's great to have an idea, right? But where's the solution? And is it a solution to a big problem? And that to me is like, give me the biggest problem possible. I'll find a solution for it, I absolutely enjoyed the conversation. I know we can talk more about sports, but before we sign off, I know that you have a free guide, right, that you were giving away. Do you want to share that real quick?
Yeah, I mean, if you're a parent or you're a student athlete or you're a coach, our bread and butter at SportsForce is the college recruiting journey and that process. And we're educating student athletes from as early as like the 7th grade all the way through, junior college. So that ranges, 12 years old all the way to 20 years old sometimes. And we put together a lot of valuable education of how college recruiting works today, how college scholarships work today. And it would blow your mind that to know that there are college, recruiters that are looking at kids as early as the 7th and 8th grade, depending on what sport it is. So it's a lot different than where it was 10, 15 years ago. And there's just a lot of common mistakes that, parents and families that have never been through the process that can make. So we have this guide that really breaks down how college recruiting works, what the competition looks like. And you can go to our website, or you can probably find us on social media, but sportsforceonline.com is the website. And or SportsForce, you just search that and we'll show up as well. But it's a passion of mine. I think that, changing the paradigm of how student athletes and how parents are navigating this journey, and how they're leveraging the sport and their academics, to create a life of their dreams. I can't tell you how important it was for sports and school to be part of my upbringing. So part of my mission is I want as many other student athletes and families to keep that jersey on their back, for one more year. So if it's because that alone is going to open up more opportunities, because at the end of the day, sports is a huge social network of relationships. So if your child goes to XYZ college, plays sports there, the likelihood of them getting connected to post-collegiate opportunities and careers and businesses, and it's just much more of a fertile ground
Yeah.
coming out of college as a student athlete.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing that info. And I wanted to make sure that, other parents, college bound students also that can reach out, connect with you guys, get resources, information, education, because I think it's essential, to have that. It's a must, especially if they want to thrive, in the sports community, later in life, or even make that a career, after college as well. So, Andrew, thank you so much. I absolutely enjoyed the episode, every bit of it. You shared so much information. Congratulations on everything that you guys have done. I can tell that, just by talking with you, that you're very passionate about what you do. And that excites me, because I think that's a driving force. You have to have it as an entrepreneur. So thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, 100%. Ivan, thanks for having me. And